The bagpipes wailed their mournful cry through the thick, grey mist. Rain fell steadily, soaking the shoulders of uniformed men and women standing in solemn rows. Their faces were a blur of grief, stoic yet trembling beneath the weight of collective loss. The soft thud of shovelfuls of earth landing on the wooden coffin echoed like drum beats in Maya's ears. The wind pulled at the black canopy above the grave as if nature itself was grieving. A folded flag was pressed tightly against the chest of an elderly woman in a wheelchair, Daniel's mother, Maya's as well. Maya stood motionless in her black coat, water running down her cheeks, rain or tears, no one could tell. The sound of the pipes rose again, and with it, a hollow ache in her chest expanded, stretching the silence until it cracked open into sobs all around. But Maya's own pain was silent, cold, and buried deeper than any grave. She stood near the casket, away from the others, her hand clenched tightly around Daniel's Medal of Valor, her knuckles turned bone-white, trembling against the cold brass that had once meant pride. Now it felt like punishment. I should have been there, the words, pounded in her skull, louder than the pipes, sharper than the rain. Her brother had run into a collapsing warehouse to save 2 children. He'd gotten them out, but didn't come back. Maya hadn't even answered his last text, and now all she had left was this heavy medal, and the guilt that wrapped around it like chains. As the pastor's voice rose, Maya's gaze drifted, unfocused, and the world dissolved into memory. Don't let grief turn you into someone you're not. Daniel had told her that last night, his voice low over the phone. Pain doesn't have to make you hard, Maya. Let it remind you you're alive. She hadn't understood then. She barely heard him. She was too busy, too distracted by the world spinning around her. And now he is gone. Each word from the pastor became background static as those final words from her brother burned in her mind, like embers that refused to die out. From the corner of her eye, Maya caught movement of figure standing alone near the tree line at the edge of the cemetery. It wasn't another mourner. It was a dog. A large German shepherd, soaked from the rain, his fur matted and dark. He stood perfectly still, almost statuesque, watching the ceremony with an intensity that defied explanation. Not begging, not barking dash, just ... watching ... something about his presence made her breath hitch. No one else seemed to notice. No one whispered or pointed, and yet Maya couldn't look away. The dog didn't flinch when thunder rumbled low in the distance. He didn't shiver from the rain. He stood there as if he understood every word of the service, as if he had come to say goodbye. Maya wiped the rain from her eyes and squinted through the mist. No collar, no leash, no owner trailing behind, nothing to suggest the German shepherd belonged to anyone at all, and still he remained rooted in place, solid, unwavering, eyes fixed on the casket as though he, too, had lost someone. Maya's heart pounded harder. Her instincts screamed curiosity, but something deeper whispered reverence. The dog wasn't lost. He was here on purpose, but why? The shepherd's amber eyes locked with hers, and for a moment time fell silent. Maya felt a jolt deep in her chest, not fear, something else, recognition, the kind that lived in old memories and childhood lullabies, the way a scent can transport you back in time, or a voice can haunt your dreams. She didn't know him, and yet she did. There was a stillness in his gaze, a weight, a sorrow that mirrored her own. She whispered aloud without thinking, "Daniel." The dog didn't move, but somehow that felt like an answer. The sky had dulled to a soft, bruised grey, and the last handful of mourners shuffled away in silence, their steps muffled by the thick grass still damp from last night's rain. But the dog remained, a German shepherd, coat matted from days of exposure, sat rigid at the foot of Daniel's casket, his amber eyes locked onto the freshly packed soil. He hadn't moved since the service began, not when the prayers were spoken, not when the casket was lowered, not when people wept inches from his face. Even now, with the crowd gone, he stayed rooted, as if his soul had been buried right alongside the man everyone had come to mourn. One elderly man approached cautiously with a soft, cooing voice, offering a piece of jerky. The dog didn't even blink. Another woman tried whistling sweetly, tossing a blanket toward him like an offering. Still nothing. He wasn't lost. He didn't stray. He was waiting. Whispers passed between those still lingering by the edge of the cemetery. Must have been his. Someone muttered. But Daniel never had a dog, another replied. Still, they tried patting their thighs, calling gently, tossing treats. When the shepherd refused to move or even acknowledge them, some began to step away, unnerved by the dog's quiet defiance. There was no aggression, just something deeper, something heartbreaking. The kind attempts faded into silence. The air felt heavier now, not just with grief, but with the mystery of this creature who refused to let go, who clung to the grave as if Daniel was still holding on from below. She hadn't planned on coming. Maya had said her goodbyes to Daniel before the casket closed, but something had pulled her back. Now, as she stepped closer to the grave, her boots sinking slightly into the softened earth, her breath caught. The dog, it was the way he sat. Not wild, not feral, poised still, proud in his pain. Maya's heart began to hammer in her chest, not out of fear, but recognition. There was something hauntingly familiar about him. She took a cautious step forward. Her fingers tingled with nerves as she reached into her coat pocket, unsure what she even intended to do. But deep inside, something stirred. Was it grief, guilt, or fate? Maya knelt slowly beside him, careful not to make sudden movements. If he lunged, she'd understand. If he ran, she'd let him, but he did neither. Instead, as her knees touched the grass, the shepherd's body sank too. His haunches lowered, with a soft, reluctant sigh, and he lay flat beside the headstone. Then he whimpered. A sound so soft and aching, it pierced something deep inside her. Not a cry for help, not a demand. It was mourning, pure and simple, the kind that needed no translation. Maya's eyes welled as she realized this wasn't just a dog. This was someone left behind. A shuffle of shoes behind her. Maya turned slightly as the funeral director, a grizzled man with a clipboard and years of death etched into his expression, approached and crouched beside her. I've seen cats show up at windows. Birds perch on coffins, he said in a low voice. Once, even a horse paced a fence all night after a burial. But this, he motioned subtly toward the shepherd. This is different, like he knows, like he chose to. Stay, Maya didn't respond. She couldn't. Her throat was thick with the same truth. Maya glanced around. No one else remained now. Just her, the dog, and the lingering weight of a man now gone. Slowly, she sank fully into the grass beside him. The wind whispered through the trees, rustling dry leaves like pages being turned in a forgotten book. She didn't speak, didn't need to. The shepherd didn't move toward her, but he didn't move away either. They sat, two souls aching in tandem. Grief wasn't always loud. Sometimes it curled beside you quietly, refusing to be chased off. Maya wrapped her arms around her knees, her eyes locked on the headstone. She didn't know why, but at that moment, she needed to be there. With him, the wind shifted, ruffling the fur behind the dog's ear. That's when Maya saw it. A jagged scar, faint but unmistakable, ran just above his right eye. She leaned in, heart catching in her throat. A memory stirred ears. Ago, Daniel, barely out of training, had told her about a fire call at an abandoned warehouse. "We pulled out this dog," he'd said. Half his fur was scorched. Poor guy had a mean gash over his eye, but he was alive. Maya remembered laughing, asking if he kept the dog. Daniel had smiled sadly. "No," he'd said. "He ran off before animal control came. I never saw him again." She looked at the shepherd now. The scar, the eyes. Could it be? Her pulse thundered. What were the odds? The scar matched. The timeline worked. And why else would this dog be here, at this grave? Maya felt a chill race down her spine, not from fear, but something more profound. Destiny, maybe. Or a bond that defied logic. Could the dog have found his way back to the man who once saved him? Just to return the favor now, she reached out, slowly laying her hand on the shepherd's back. This wasn't a coincidence. This was homecoming. Maya's breath caught in her throat as she knelt in the freezing snow, gazing at the battered, panting dog before her. He was a mess dirt, clung to his coat, his ribs visible beneath the fur. His eyes, wide and wary, met hers, unsure of what she was going to do. But there was something in those eyes, something desperate. Maya couldn't explain it, but she couldn't walk away either. Her heart clenched as she whispered, "Come on, boy. Let's go home." She had no idea what she was doing, but the pull in her gut was undeniable. The dog hesitated for a moment, then, almost reluctantly, crawled into the back seat of her car. Maya started the engine, her hands trembling slightly. As she drove away, the dog lying still in the back seat. He didn't trust her, she knew that. But somehow, she felt like she was taking him somewhere he could finally rest. The drive was quiet, just the sound of tires on wet pavement filling the air. Maya kept glancing at the dog through the rearview mirror. His eyes were now closed, though his ears twitched at every turn of the wheel. When they reached her house, she sat for a moment, staring at the dog. It was dark outside, but the reflection of the street light illuminated his fur, streaked with soot from what looked like a fire. She remembered the story Daniel had told her about the fire at the warehouse, where he'd found his old German shepherd. Ash, Daniel had said, naming the dog after the remnants of that place. Maya's voice broke the silence. "Ash," she whispered, the name falling into the quiet space between them. It was perfect. "You'll be Ash." The first few hours were tense. Ash circled the living room, sniffing every corner, every door, as though waiting for something to happen. Maya sat on the couch, her eyes following him as he paced the room. She couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for him. He wasn't just a stray. He had been through something bad. She knew that much. But she couldn't figure out why he looked at her with such wariness, like she might suddenly change her mind. He stopped by the window, staring out into the night, and Maya stared too, lost in her own thoughts. The room was quiet except for Ash's soft breathing. She couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't just giving him a home, he was giving her something to dot days past. And Maya grew more comfortable with Ash's presence, even if he remained distant. She didn't mind the silence. Sometimes it felt like they shared it in a way no one else could understand. One evening, after a particularly lonely day, Maya sat on the couch, staring at a framed photo of Daniel. Tears slid down her cheeks, but she didn't bother to wipe them away. The grief was still raw, the hole he left inside her still unhealed. Ash padded quietly over to her side, his warm body resting against her leg. He didn't try to comfort her, didn't offer affection. He simply sat with her, as if understanding that sometimes just being there was enough. Maya rested her hand on his head, a quiet bond forming between them. It was late one night when it happened. Maya sat at the kitchen table, clutching a letter from Daniel's lawyer. The words blurred in front of her eyes, and suddenly she was sobbing uncontrollably. Her body shook with the weight of it all. She felt a sharp poke at her hand. Ash was there, his nose nudging her gently. His eyes, soft and understanding, stared into hers. She had never imagined a dog could share such a vulnerable moment with a person. She smiled through her tears and stroked his fur. For the first time since Daniel's passing, she didn't feel completely alone. The next morning, Maya sat again with Daniel's photo, the weight of his absence still pressing on her chest. Ash lay at her feet, his eyes studying her quietly. After a moment, he rose and padded over to her. Maya looked up just in time to see him place his paw gently over her hand, as if reaching out to offer comfort. The act was simple, but it struck her deeply. There was something in that gesture, something she couldn't name, that made the grief feel a little less heavy. Ash stayed with her as she silently held onto the memory of Daniel, his presence a quiet anchor in the storm of emotions. It was around midnight when the barking started. Maya bolted upright in bed, her heart racing. Ash was thrashing on the floor, his body rigid, his claws scraping against the wooden floor. She rushed to his side, calling his name, but he didn't seem to hear her. His eyes were wild, unfocused, as though trapped in a nightmare. Maya gently grabbed his shoulders, trying to calm him, but he pulled away, growling low in his throat. His body trembled violently, and for a moment, Maya felt utterly helpless. She had no idea what haunted him, but whatever it wasn't something she could fix in an instant. She sat beside him, waiting, whispering soothing words that she hoped would reach him. As the minutes dragged on, Ash's body began to relax. The tremors eased, but he remained restless, his eyes still dating nervously around the room. Maya stroked his back softly, trying to reassure him, though she wasn't sure she had any answers. Ash eventually settled beside her on the floor, his body curled close to hers. The terror that had consumed him seemed to settle in the silence between them. Maya realized, with a sudden clarity, that animals carry invisible scars too. Scars that don't heal easily, and some wounds run far deeper than the visible ones. She whispered softly, "I'm here, Ash. You're safe now." The words were meant for both of them, the morning after the nightmare. Maya laced up her sneakers and stood by the door, looking down at Ash. He had been quieter than usual, more watchful, but there was something about the way he looked at her now that felt different. "Hey, buddy," she said, bending down to his level. "You want to go for a jog?" For the first time, Ash's ears perked up. He trotted toward the door, his tail wagging cautiously. Maya smiled, opening the door to the morning sun. It was a simple step-one jog, one small act of moving forward, but it felt like something much bigger. It was the beginning of something new, something hopeful. As Maya jogged through the park, Ash kept pace beside her, his strong legs working in sync with hers. For the first time since Daniel's funeral, Maya felt lightness in her chest. She let out a laugh, not forced, but genuine, and Ash looked at her, his ears perked, almost as if he was laughing with her. She didn't know if they were healing each other, or if it was just the simple act of moving forward together. But at that moment, it didn't matter. The pain of the past was still there, lingering at the edges, but it wasn't as heavy anymore. It was just a little easier to bear. A few days later, Maya noticed a plain white van parked at the end of her street. The engine was off, but it sat there, just watching. It wasn't the first time she had seen the van, but today, something about it felt wrong. Ash stiffened beside her, his eyes narrowing as he stared at the vehicle. She tried to shake off the unease, but the tension in the air was palpable. Something was off, and she couldn't ignore it. Every time the van appeared, Ash's body grew tense. His tail went rigid, and his eyes never left the shadows where the van lingered. Maya knew something was wrong, but she didn't know what. He was warning her, she could feel it in the air. But what was the threat, and why did Ash react this way? Concerned, Maya decided to visit the local animal shelter. She needed to know more about Ash, about his past, and why he seemed so unsettled around that van when she arrived. She asked to speak with the staff, hoping to find some clue to his story. The records were sparse, but what she learned chilled her to the core. The shelter records showed that Ash had never been adopted. In fact, they hadn't seen him in over a year. He had vanished from the system entirely. Someone had erased his history, and Maya couldn't shake the feeling that something dark had happened. Maya felt her heart race as she realized the truth. Ash wasn't just a stray, he had escaped something terrible, and now it was clear someone was looking for him. She wouldn't let anyone take him, not now, not after everything they had shared. Maya vowed to protect him, no matter who came looking. She had already lost too much. She wasn't going to lose him too. Maya stood still on the threshold, her heart beating like a drum in her chest. The door had been closed just hours ago, yet now it hung open, swaying slightly as if disturbed by an unseen hand. Her gaze swept across the dimly lit hallway, her instinct screaming that something was wrong. There was an eerie silence, a heavy stillness that hung in the air like a fog. She could feel it, a sense of unease settling deep in her bones. The faintest rustle from inside, just beyond the edge of the hallway, made her step forward, but she hesitated. Ash hadn't barked yet. Was something wrong? Why was the house so quiet? Suddenly, Ash's voice shattered the tension. His bark was different, deep, frantic, and filled with pure panic. Maya's breath hitched, her heart racing. The sound of it sent a jolt through her entire body, instinctively drawing her toward the living room. She rushed forward, knowing something was terribly wrong. As she turned the corner, she saw him, Ash, standing tall and bristling with fury, eyes wide with terror as he barked in the direction of the back door. Maya's pulse quickened. She felt it too. The house wasn't just unsettled, it had been violated. Someone had been here. Someone dangerous. Maya's eyes snapped to the back window just in time to see a shadow dart across the yard, disappearing into the dark night. Her heart skipped a beat. A figure, male, tall, moving fast. He was already gone, vanishing like a wisp of smoke, but the danger lingered in the air. Maya's blood ran cold. The house had been broken into. No warning, no time to call for help. She looked back at Ash, his posture still tense, his eyes fixed on the window, his growls low but unwavering. Maya took a slow step back, her mind racing with questions and fear. Had the man seen them? The police arrived quickly, combing through every inch of the house. But there was nothing. No signs of forced entry. No fingerprints. No stolen items. Just an unsettling emptiness that made Maya's skin crawl. The officers searched through every room, but their faces remained grim. Knowing that the break-in held a deeper, more sinister meaning, they couldn't explain it, and neither could Maya. Her heart raced as she looked at Ash, who was still on. High alert, growling softly, his body tense, not ready to relax. He sensed the danger, even if they didn't fully understand it. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. Ash hadn't left his side. He stood by the door, every muscle in his body coiled like a spring, alert to the smallest sound. He hadn't slept either, his eyes never leaving the door. It was as if he knew something they didn't know, that the danger was still there, lurking just out of sight. Maya ran her fingers through his fur, trying to soothe him, but his protective instinct had taken over. He was her shield. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind sent him into an alert posture. He was guarding her. The next day, as Maya sifted through Daniel's old belongings, a faded newspaper clipping caught her eye. Buried beneath a pile of forgotten memories, it seemed almost out of place. She carefully unfolded it, and her eyes widened as she read the headline. Warehouse fire claims lives, suspicion of arson. Her breath caught in her throat as she scanned the article, which detailed a fire that had destroyed an old warehouse 2 years ago. But what really made her blood run cold was the mention of Eli Warden, infamous figure in the underground dogfighting scene. A man she had never heard of until now. Eli Ward. The name stared back at her from the clipping, haunting and familiar all at once. She couldn't understand it. How did a man like him fit into this puzzle? She read further, learning that Eli had been the orchestrator behind the fire that had killed several animals trapped inside. The article even mentioned that Ash had once been one of those animals. Her heart dropped. Ash had been a victim. He had survived Eli Ward's hellish world, and now, somehow, that same world was creeping back into her life. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. Her eyes skimmed down the page, landing on a small note at the bottom. Eli Ward had been released from prison 6 months ago. Maya felt the weight of those words settle in her chest. The timeline clicked like pieces of a broken puzzle falling into place. Eli had been free for months, and now strange things were happening. The van, the break-in. She could no longer deny Eli Ward was back, and Ash was in danger again. The police were able to track the van scene outside Maya's house the night of the break-in. It didn't take long to trace the license plate, and when the results came back, her worst fears were confirmed. The van belonged to Eli Ward. Maya's stomach twisted with dread. It wasn't just a coincidence. Eli had been circling her home. He was watching, and he wasn't done with Ash. It wasn't just about the break-in anymore. Eli Ward had unfinished business, and now Maya and Ash were directly in his sights. Despite the growing tension, Maya tried to maintain a sense of normalcy. She needed to keep life going for Ash's sake, needed to get out, get some air. But every step she took in the park, with Ash by her side, was weighed down by the unease settling over her like a dark cloud. Ash kept a steady gaze on the surroundings, every rustling leaf making his ears perk up. Something was off. He could sense it. Maya felt it too. Every time they walked outside, the threat felt closer. She gripped Ash's leash tighter. As they neared the far side of the park, Maya heard the rustling of leaves behind them. Ash's hackles rose instantly, his body tense, ready to spring. Before Maya could react, a dark figure emerged from the trees, lunging toward them with startling speed. Her breath caught in her throat as she saw the man's face silly-ward. Her heart pounded in her chest. He was here. He was finally here. Maya's legs went cold, and in a split second, Eli grabbed for Ash, trying to yank him away. But Ash wasn't having it. His teeth bared, his muscles coiled, ready to fight. Ash broke free of Eli's grip with a powerful snap of his jaws, then launched himself at the man, his body a blur of fury. Maya's heart stopped as she watched Ash charge forward, his instincts taking over, his desire to protect her stronger than anything else. Eli stumbled back in surprise, but Ash didn't stop. He lunged again, teeth flashing. Maya's pulse raced, and she screamed for him to stop. But Ash wasn't listening. This wasn't just about survival. This was about everything Eli had put him through. The terror, the pain. Ash had found the courage to fight back, just as Maya feared. Eli seemed ready to drag Ash into the darkness. But then a distant sound pierced the air. Sirens. The police arrived just in time, pulling up to the park with flashing lights and screeching tires. Eli froze. Maya could see the fear in his eyes as he realized the chase was over. He'd been caught. Within moments, the officers had him in cuffs. But Maya's attention was fixed on Ash. He stood beside her, panting heavily, his eyes wild but triumphant. He had protected her. He had fought back. He was her hero. News of Ash's bravery spread quickly. People began to recognize him for who he truly was: survivor, a protector, a hero. Maya held his face in her hands, tears of pride and relief in her eyes. This was no longer just the broken dog who had been rescued. He was so much more. He had proven it. Maya awoke to the soft, rhythmic breathing of Ash curled up at the foot of her bed, his familiar warmth seeping into her toes. The years had passed since Daniel's death, but in those quiet, peaceful moments, it was hard to imagine a time without Ash. The scars of loss still lingered, but Ash's gentle presence had filled the spaces where grief once lingered, stitching her heart back together. They were a team in a way she had never expected. The sun filtered through the curtains, casting a soft glow on Ash's relaxed form. And for the first time in a long while, Maya felt at peace. The simple moment scar rides with Ash's head out. The window, late-night walks, when the world was quiet, became her haven. She would smile as he walked ahead, tail wagging, proud of his place in her life. Ash wasn't just a companion. He was a part of her heart, a living testament to the healing power of unconditional love. Each day, Maya's shift ended with the rush of energy that felt like a bomb to her weary soul. As she approached the doors of the hospital, she would see Ash waiting for her, as he had done every day for months. His ears would perk up, his eyes would sparkle, and the moment she stepped outside, his tail would wag in a way that made her laugh every time. It was a simple routine, but it was a source of immense comfort. Maya didn't need to say anything. Ash's presence was enough. The world outside the hospital, with all its chaos and pain, felt far away in those quiet moments. The comfort of knowing Ash would always be there, waiting for her, was an unspoken promise that she held on to tightly. One quiet morning, as the sun barely touched the horizon, Maya stood in her kitchen, staring at a small flower she had picked from her garden. It wasn't much a simple daisy, but it felt like the right offering. She knew it was time. Ash, as if sensing the purpose of the day, wagged his tail in eager anticipation, ready to follow her wherever she led. Maya had avoided Daniel's grave for some time, the pain of his loss too sharp, but today was different. Today she would honor him with Ash by her side. The drive to the cemetery was silent, filled only with the soft hum of the engine and the occasional sound of Ash's gentle panting. When they arrived, Maya parked the car and stepped out, holding the flower tightly in her hand. Ash, as usual, was right beside her, his fur blowing softly in the morning breeze. The weight of the moment settled over her, but it was a weight she no longer feared. At Daniel's grave, Maya knelt down and placed the flower on the stone. It was a small gesture, but it felt monumental in its significance. Ash sat beside her, his body still, but his tail thumping against the ground, as if sharing the moment. Maya's heart swelled with a mixture of grief and gratitude. The emptiness left by Daniel was still profound, but Ash's calm presence beside her brought a sense of solace. She glanced at the dog, who seemed to understand more than she could express. In that quiet moment, it felt like Ash was honoring Daniel too, giving her a small gift of peace. As Maya stood there, staring at the grave, a revelation washed over her, quiet, yet undeniable. Daniel didn't just save Ash on that fateful day. He had sent Ash to her. She had never fully understood it until now. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that Ash had been a gift from Daniel, a lifeline in a world that sometimes felt unbearably heavy. Ash had saved her in ways she couldn't have imagined. It wasn't just the comfort he brought. It was the way he had filled the gaps in her life, helping her heal, helping her rediscover joy, helping her move forward. Maya wiped a tear from her eye, not just for the loss of Daniel, but for the realization that he had never truly left her. Through Ash, Daniel's love and care were still present, still guiding her through the darkest days. As the months passed, Ash's role in Maya's life shifted again. He began visiting patients at the hospital, a therapy dog, his vest now emblazoned with the words, "Please pet me." Maya had been hesitant at first, unsure if Ash would be ready for such a role. But the more she saw how his gentle nature could soothe those around him, the more she realized that Ash had found a new purpose. He brought comfort to the nurses, the doctors, and most especially to the patients. That Ash had come from a place of survival, of need, and now he was giving that same gift of comfort to others. Maya watched as he interacted with people, offering his soft gaze, his calming presence, and his unwavering loyalty. He was a living embodiment of healing his own wounds healed, now helping others heal theirs. One afternoon, Maya watched as Ash approached a burn victim who had been in the hospital for weeks. The patient, a firefighter who had suffered severe injuries, had barely spoken during her stay. But when Ash approached her, his quiet presence seemed to spark something in her. The woman's lips trembled, then parted in a smile, the first smile Maya had seen since her arrival. Ash sat beside her, his head resting gently on her lap, his eyes filled with empathy. It was as if he knew exactly what the woman needed. The burn victim's hand trembled as she stroked Ash's fur, her tears falling freely. Maya stood back, her heart swelling with pride for the dog who had brought so much comfort. Ash had been her healer, and now he was someone else's. At the annual Firefighter fundraiser, Maya stood in front of a crowd, Ash by her side. It was a gathering of people who had been touched by the heroism of the firefighters, the same heroes who had fought alongside Daniel. Maya had been invited to speak, to share her story. and she knew that Ash's role was integral to that story. With Ash standing beside her, Maya felt a sense of calm wash over her. She took the microphone and began to speak, her voice steady, despite the emotion that bubbled just below the surface. "He saved Ash, and Ash saved me," she said, her voice growing stronger with every word. She told the crowd about Daniel's selfless act, how it had set off a chain of events that led her to understand how Ash had, in turn, saved her in ways she couldn't fully explain. Maya's voice wavered only for a moment as she spoke those words, but her eyes remained clear. She had never imagined her life would lead her here, speaking to a room full of people, sharing her story of love, loss, and healing. As she finished, there was a moment of silence, then applause. The crowd had felt the depth of her words and Ash's impact on so many lives. Maya smiled through her tears, knowing that Daniel's legacy lived on, not just in her heart, but in the hearts of everyone Ash had touched. Maya sat on the porch, the warm rays of the setting sun casting soft shadows on the floorboards. Ash, now lying contentedly by her side, shifted slightly to nuzzle his head into her lap. She gently ran her fingers through his fur, her mind wandering back to the day they met. He had been so broken, so frail, but in his eyes she saw a glimpse of resilience, of something unspoken. She never expected him to become the one who would save her. But now, looking at him, she knew it wasn't just her saving him, it was a two-way bond, one woven through shared pain, quiet moments, and healing. He had healed her more than any human could have. As Maya looked at Ash, she understood that his loyalty wasn't merely the instinctive attachment of a dog to its owner. It ran deeper, tied to memories of a bond forged through survival. He had been through his own battles, his own loss, and in his heart, there was a silent understanding of the grief that Maya carried. She saw it in his eyes when he lay beside her on difficult days, his head resting on her shoulder. It wasn't just the need for affection. It was a silent acknowledgement that, though words couldn't always heal, they both knew what it felt like to have the world broken and to pick up the pieces together. Ash had become a constant in Maya's life, not just through his actions, but through his stillness. Every morning she would leave for work, and there he would be waiting patiently at the door, watching her with those knowing eyes. It was as if he understood something she couldn't put into words, that sometimes the greatest comfort comes not from conversation or explanation, but from the quiet presence of someone who doesn't need to say anything to make you feel understood. His waiting had become a metaphor, a reminder that healing doesn't always demand attention. It sometimes simply requires being there, silently and steadily, offering comfort through presence alone. Maya had always believed that love, in its purest form, was a bond shared only between humans. But Ash had shown her that love didn't belong to any one species. It wasn't bound by words, gestures, or even the shape of the being who offered it. It was the shared moments, the silent understanding, the mutual respect. Her heart had opened to him in ways she never thought possible, and in return, Ash had shown her the power of unconditional love and affection that transcended the lines between human and animal. Grief was something Maya had carried with her for a long time, but as time passed, she had learned that it didn't completely erase. It never really went away, but it softened. It left scars, yes, but those scars had also created space for new connections, new joys, and the possibility of healing. She realized that in the wake of losing Daniel, she had been given a chance to love again, to open her heart, and that love came in the form of Ash, a dog who had taught her that life moves on, and healing happens when you least expect it. Maya had always thought that healing was a linear journey, something that had a distinct beginning and end. But as she shared her life with Ash, she understood that healing wasn't measured in milestones. It was in the small, quiet moments. The soft thud of his tail as he greeted her after a long shift. The sound of his paws padding along beside her during morning walks, and the way he rested his head on her lap when she cried, as if he understood the weight of her emotions. Healing didn't happen in big, dramatic gestures. It happened in the moments in between, in the silent understanding they shared, in the constant presence that Ash offered her without ever asking for anything in return. Through every gentle touch, every shared breath, Maya realized that healing was not a destination. It was a journey she was walking every day, alongside a dog who had become her strength.